Melania Trump stumbles upon a homeless child in tears, and her response will leave you speechless. Watch what happens next, and prepare to be moved. It was a chilly afternoon in a bustling city, the kind of day where the noise of traffic and hurried pedestrians seemed to drown out everything else. As Melania Trump made her way down the crowded streets, her eyes were drawn to a small figure sitting alone on the cold pavement. The child, no older than 6, was huddled near a broken bench, clutching a ragged stuffed animal for comfort. The world around the child moved on as if nothing had happened, but Melania couldn't ignore the piercing sight of the little one's face, streaked with tears. It was an image that struck her deeply, one that many might have overlooked, but one that she couldn't turn away from. Melania had been no stranger to the challenges facing many in society, particularly children in vulnerable situations. Yet seeing this child in such a state of despair hit her harder than she expected. The child's eyes, filled with fear and uncertainty, mirrored a reality that far too many children were forced to face daily. They were disconnected from the bustling life around them, abandoned to the harsh elements and the indifference of passers-by. It was a stark reminder of the world's darkest corners, places where young lives were often overshadowed by neglect, poverty, and homelessness. Without hesitation, Melania slowed her steps. She moved closer to the child, her presence now in stark contrast to the busy, indifferent world around them. The child flinched at first, as if not expecting anyone to care. But Melania didn't rush to offer words of comfort just yet. Instead, she knelt down to the child's level, making herself approachable, trying to bridge the gap between the comfort of her world and the desolation the child was experiencing. The sound of her soft voice broke through the wall of silence surrounding the two. "Hey there," she gently said. "Are you okay?" The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of true concern. The child's sobs quieted slightly, but the pain in their eyes remained. In that moment, Melania realized that what this child needed was not just a kind word, but a connection, a moment where someone truly saw them, understood their suffering, and took action. But this wasn't just about one child in distress. It was about the thousands of others like them, the invisible faces of society's overlooked children. Melania knew that what she did next could be more than just an act of kindness. It could serve as a catalyst for something greater. This encounter, this heartbreaking moment, could be the first step towards something larger, something transformative. As Melania knelt beside the child, her mind wandered to the broader issue of homelessness, particularly among children, an issue that many chose to ignore. The small hands clutching the stuffed animal spoke volumes about the child's longing for safety, warmth, and love. It was clear that this was not an isolated incident. Homelessness, especially among children, was a growing epidemic, one that often went unseen in the hustle and bustle of city life. Shelters were overcrowded, resources limited, and the harsh realities of living on the streets meant children often became the silent casualties of a system that failed to protect them. In the midst of this heart-wrenching situation, the child before her was a face of a much larger, tragic reality. Melania's heart ached as she thought about how many children were living in similar conditions across the country. The streets were unforgiving, offering no shelter from the dangers of the world, whether it be the brutal cold of winter, the violence of city neighborhoods, or the psychological toll of being abandoned. Many of these children were forced to grow up too fast, learning to fend for themselves in an environment that offered no protection. The lack of a stable home meant the absence of basic security, food, education, and the nurturing environment that every child deserves. It was a stark contrast to the life Melania had known, one of privilege and opportunity, but it made her realize how deeply society's most vulnerable were suffering in silence. The child's tears were not just the result of fear or sadness. They were an expression of the trauma that so many children faced, both physically and emotionally. What was most heartbreaking was the possibility that this child had already experienced a lifetime of hardship despite their young age. Melania couldn't shake the image of this innocent soul trying to survive in a world that had let them down. Every sob echoed the story of countless others who were invisible to the general public, swept under the rug of society's distractions and priorities. This wasn't just a case of misfortune, it was a reflection of a system that had failed to protect the most vulnerable. In that moment, Melania knew she couldn't just walk away, pretending not to see the suffering. The child's pain was a sharp reminder of what needed to be done to address the larger issue of homelessness among children. Melania had the privilege of influence, and she could use it to help raise awareness and take action. It wasn't just about comforting one child, it was about shedding light on the silent epidemic that had left so many children to fend for themselves without hope or care. Without another moment's hesitation, Melania reached out and gently placed a hand on the child's shoulder. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was one that carried a deep sense of care and understanding. The child looked up, eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. They seemed to hesitate, unsure of this stranger's intentions, but Melania's presence exuded warmth and compassion, qualities that immediately put the child at ease. She smiled softly, offering the child a sense of safety they had likely not felt in a long time. The simple act of someone acknowledging their pain made a profound difference. "You're not alone," she whispered, her voice full of empathy. It wasn't just a reassurance, it was an unspoken promise that someone saw them, that someone cared. She gently helped the child to their feet, offering them her coat to keep warm, as the biting cold of the city streets began to settle in. But her kindness didn't end there. Melania knew that a mere gesture would not suffice. She had a platform that could bring attention to this urgent issue, and she wasn't about to let the moment pass without taking action. It wasn't just about comforting the child for a moment. It was about offering them a future, about showing the world that compassion could spark change. The surrounding crowd, which had initially ignored the child, now paused, witnessing a scene that many would remember for a long time. Melania, a figure accustomed to the spotlight, was no longer just a celebrity. She had become a beacon of empathy in a world where such gestures were too rare. Her actions weren't performative, they were genuine. She didn't seek attention or accolades. Her decision to help was driven by a deep, personal belief that change had to begin with individual acts of compassion. In a city that was often too busy to notice, Melania's gesture became a moment of stillness, a moment where time seemed to stand still in recognition of human suffering and kindness. As the child clutched her hand, a sense of peace began to settle in, breaking through the layers of tension in the air. What had initially seemed like an impossible situation, one of hopelessness, was beginning to shift. The child, still unsure but now feeling cared for, looked up at Melania, a flicker of trust forming where there had been fear just moments before. And in that silence, as the world continued to turn, Melania knew that she had done something that would leave a lasting impression, not just on the child, but on everyone who witnessed it. Her compassion was a spark, igniting a larger conversation about the future of children in need. As Melania stood up from the child, her hand still resting on their shoulder, a ripple of energy spread throughout the crowd that had gathered around them. The city's fast-paced rhythm seemed to slow for a brief moment, as if the world had taken a collective breath. Those who had initially passed by, too absorbed in their own lives to notice the child's distress, now stopped and watched as Melania's simple act of kindness unfolded before them. The change was subtle, but undeniable. The streets that had been filled with the sound of hurried footsteps and the hum of the city now carried a quieter, more reflective tone. People who had once looked away from the child's pain were now compelled to pause and take a closer look at their own roles in the world's suffering. This single moment, this act of compassion, began to stir something within those who had witnessed it. As Melania helped the child to stand, she wasn't just offering physical comfort. She was demonstrating the profound impact that one small act of kindness could have on an entire community. It was as if the act was a mirror, reflecting the potential for kindness and empathy that lay dormant within everyone. People's faces softened, their expressions becoming more thoughtful. The cold indifference that had previously marked their interactions now seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. Word of the incident spread quickly, not just among the crowd, but across social media. People from all walks of life began to discuss what had happened, not just as a random act of charity, but as a powerful example of the difference that one person could make. The ripple effect took on a life of its own. Social media platforms lit up with stories of how Melania's kindness had inspired others to reflect on their own actions, or to take a deeper look at how they could contribute to solving the issues facing children in need. Conversations about homelessness and childhood poverty gained new momentum, fueled by the viral image of a woman who had chosen to stop and care when the rest of the world had moved on. In the days that followed, various local organizations and shelters began to report a spike in donations and offers of volunteer work. People, moved by Melania's example, began to question how they could get involved in helping the homeless, particularly children. The ripple effect, born from a single act, now had the potential to change the trajectory of many lives. The image of Melania bending down to a vulnerable child became a symbol, one of hope, action, and the possibility for every individual to play a role in building a more compassionate society. While Melania's moment of kindness had already touched many, she was not content to leave things there. Her desire to make a lasting impact extended far beyond the brief interaction she had with the child. After ensuring that the child was safe and had access to immediate care, Melania took the next step, a more significant commitment to addressing the root causes of childhood homelessness. This was not about a fleeting gesture. It was about creating systemic change. She immediately reached out to local shelters, social services, and child advocacy organizations, offering not just her name, but her resources and influence. Her involvement became more than just a symbolic act. It was a commitment to be a driving force in supporting initiatives aimed at eradicating homelessness among children. She worked closely with these organizations to raise awareness, organize fundraising events, and push for legislative reforms that would provide more comprehensive support to homeless children and families. Melania was determined to leverage her platform, using her voice to draw attention to this urgent issue that so many had long overlooked, but her actions went even further. During a press conference, Melania made an announcement that took many by surprise. She was funding the construction of a new community center designed specifically to provide safe housing and educational resources for homeless children. The center would not only provide shelter, but also a nurturing environment where children could receive the care, attention, and stability they needed to rebuild their lives. It was a bold move, one that would require significant investment and effort, but Melania knew that it was the right thing to do. The project would serve as a model for other communities, a tangible example of how private individuals and organizations could come together to make a difference. The offer was more than just financial support. Melania committed to staying actively involved, offering her time and personal attention to ensure that the center met its goals. She planned to work closely with staff, helping to create mentorship programs, after-school initiatives, and even providing scholarships for children to attend schools that could give them the education they desperately needed to break the cycle of poverty. It was an ambitious plan, but Melania's decision to take action went far beyond the surface-level kindness of the initial encounter. It became clear that this moment, while deeply personal, would spark something much larger, a movement that sought to address the core issues of childhood homelessness and to give children like the one she had encountered a chance at a brighter, more hopeful future. By choosing to act decisively, Melania demonstrated that true compassion is not just about feeling sympathy, it's about taking responsibility and using whatever influence you have to help create meaningful, lasting change. Her offer wasn't just a promise to one child, it was a pledge to an entire community, and perhaps even a society that desperately needed more people to step up and do the same. As news of Melania's actions spread, the media quickly picked up on the story, and the reaction was one of widespread shock and admiration. The public was used to seeing high-profile figures involved in charity work, but Melania's personal involvement and the depth of her commitment set her apart. Her decision to go beyond a simple gesture of kindness and take concrete action was met with praise from various corners of society, including both political figures and everyday citizens. News outlets highlighted not only the immediate impact of her help, but also the broader implications of her initiative. The announcement of the community center and her ongoing involvement in child homelessness brought a new layer of depth to her public image. Many admired her for stepping up in a way that was both personal and genuine, rather than just a one-off act for the cameras. The media buzzed with stories about how one individual's compassion had sparked a larger conversation about homelessness, making people question what more could be done to address such a pressing issue. However, the coverage wasn't without its critics. Some questioned her motivations, wondering if this was just another publicity stunt. But even these critiques didn't overshadow the fact that Melania had created a moment that went far beyond any typical celebrity endorsement. What mattered most was the conversation that followed, the spotlight it put on the issue of homelessness and the attention it drew to a cause that needed more than just awareness, but real, actionable solutions. Ultimately, Melania's actions generated a mixture of admiration, reflection, and renewed hope. It was clear that her efforts were more than just a fleeting moment. They had the potential to spark a larger movement, with many inspired to take their own steps toward making a difference. The media, though critical at times, could not ignore the sincerity of her commitment to change, and that, in itself, marked the beginning of a meaningful shift in how society approached the issue of homeless children. Melania's unexpected act of kindness and her commitment to helping homeless children delivered a powerful message. True compassion transcends fame and politics. It reminded us that every individual has the potential to make a significant difference, no matter their background or status. Through her actions, she showed that real change begins with a single step, and that kindness, when combined with genuine effort, can inspire a ripple effect that touches countless lives. Let's all take a lesson from Melania's example and do what we can to help those in need. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales.